Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the long-awaited part 2 video for my BMP-3 demo. My apologies that it's taken so long to put all this together. I'm finally starting to work through my backlog of videos that I promised you guys, so thank you for being patient. Seeing on screen here is my army that I ran at Adepticon, because also in this video I'm going to do a little rundown kind of how it went. So without further ado, let's break into my army list. Here's my army list. Feel free to pause to take a closer look. Here's a nice close-up of the army. I ended up going with a BMP-3 battalion where I put my command unit in a BMP-1 so it would be able to start on the table if I got deep reserves. I had two understrength unit of BMP-3s with a IGLA team and a AGS team to give me those two extra BMP-3 bodies. I then had two units of BMP-1 Recce, 4 BMP-1s apiece. Then I had 4 Gaskins and a unit of T-62Ms. I forget what the exact designation is for Soviet forces, but I had Soviet T-62Ms in formation. Then out of formation, I had the 5 T-55s, a BMP-1, and 3 Acacias. Also, I had 4 Tunguskas in the formation. And so the way this list basically ran was when I pulled reserves, I would have one of the BMP-3 units, the T-62s, and the T-55s in reserve. Then the awkward instance that would happen that I was hoping for was in the event that I pulled a meeting engagement, because I would then be able to rotate out the BMP-1s and be able to start on the table with moving rate of fire, which is something that's very awkward for the Soviets. But the main issue that I ran into with this list was it was very small, fragile units, which is extremely difficult to pull off as Soviets or arguably even any Warsaw Pact player. I only had 6 RPG-7VRs in the list. I had 2 understrength infantry companies, so it wasn't that hard to take them out. My record that I went at Adepticon was I went 2-1 and then dropped the 4th game because it was just going way too long. It's been 10 years since I played in a tournament, and it was already 7:30 at night, and we still had one more game to play. But the 2 games that I won, one of them was against I forget their names, but one of them got messed up by the deep reserve rule. They thought that they could put the transports in reserve while deploying the infantry and then have the transports come on the table at a later turn. And so they just left them completely out of the game. So it was basically throwing 74 points at 30 some odd points of West Germans. He was playing Martyr 2s. But then the other game that was a much more close game was against a West German player who was running a Leo 1 company. And that one I was able to deploy the 2 tank units and I think I put the Acacias, the Gaskins, and one of the BMP-3 units and the 2 BMP-1 Recce units in reserve, and just basically bull rushed his objective on the side. The BMP-3s has the awkward flub gun, as I called it. They got a brutal 100mm shell that they're able to fire, so the 6 of those combined with the 5 T-62s managed to blast his infantry, even though they were dug in, off of the objective to take it. And then the game that I lost was against one of the meta lists, a BTR spam list to get as many RPG-7VRs into it as possible, and I just got absolutely obliterated. Kind of vapor locked and made some poor decisions in that game. But yeah, overall a pretty good showing for my first tournament in 10 years. First ever Battlefront tournament as well for Team Yankee or Flames of War. And it was a really neat experience. I'm really looking forward to next year and modifying my list as the meta changes. I bought a bunch of boxes of BTRs and T-55s because those did very, very well at the sub 100 point game level. And that's really my bit on Adepticon. It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to go into the whole Flames of War debacle because that is very much beating a dead horse, and I did not play in the Flames of War tournament. I only witnessed it as a bystander. But the rest of the video now will be how I painted these BMP-3s in the shot camo, which I did in a manner similar to my T-80s, that if you look on the channel, you'll be able to, forget exactly which video it was, but it was a while back. I did a video on how I painted my shot camo on my T80s. So these BMP-3s are painted the same way as that, but I figured it's a little bit more up to date with my video shooting and such. So once again, apologies for the audio with the airbrush. I'm hoping to have a better system in place now that we're at the house to be able to do some better voiceovers so that you don't hear the constant flumping of the airbrush compressor in the background. But enjoy. So our next step here is going to be a light zenithal highlight. I've been getting better at doing zenithal highlights and getting them on a little bit thicker for better contrast. However, my BMP-3s that are currently painted aren't as heavily contrasted with their green. So I'm going to be attempting to match that a little better than our new contrasts, even though they look a little better. The difference will be a little bit too stark. So our first bits that we are going to hit lightly are going to be our holes. Okay, this guy's back far enough. Okay, so what you want white paint and to just lightly give it a zap. Come on all edge areas.
When I come in with my base coat green, it will catch these white portions here and highlight itself, especially in the process of applying a watered down thinner layer. And this is something that you can really only quickly achieve with an airbrush. You can do a similar manner with lasers, but you're not going to be able to get as smooth a gradient as an airbrush, as quickly as you're able to with an airbrush. Just hitting all these little armor panels and such that would be not necessarily raised, but almost being a trick, so to speak, to make them pop out a little more. We're going to hit our top guy here. He's going to be extremely light. And we're going to try and do a little bit more of a laid back highlight on our front here. So there is white in place, but not that heavy. And we're going to do the same with our portions here. A very light application, so as not to take away from the initial highlight hit. And we're going to do the same. I've got a little edge bit here. We're hitting that, so that stands out. And then once we hit our other side, it's just retarded. Double up hitting the wheels.
And voila, there's a zenithal highlighted. Let me just go get this little hit alongside our edge here. Again, very light. And there you go. Zenithal highlighted BMP chassis. So now we're going to go into the turret. Am I going to be able to? Yes, if I do it left tap. There we go. So same thing, except I'm going to go a little bit heavier on this. Oh, I actually missed a spot.
Alright, so our first touch here is going to be a little crew hatch and a little top there. We're going to hit that logo, and our hatch here. We're going to ring our edges. And then here, go a little bit more heavy with the white. Because the turret is a little bit lighter than the vehicle. And that will give it the illusion of it being higher. And hit 6 of our smoke launchers like so. And then we're going to touch off our portions of gun and arrow.
And there we go. A zenithal highlighted BMP turret. So we'll be right back after our next hyperlapse portion. Alright, so our next stage with the BMP-3s are the base coat. So in order to try and make it so that the colors match, because it's been a while, I brought one of my other BMP-3 chassis out so I could try and get the green to match. Because it is going to be lighter because of the zenithal, and I didn't zenithal these as much. These were not necessarily new with the airbrush. I've been using airbrushes for a while, but I've gotten a lot stronger and more confident with my gradients since then. So it's definitely going to have to be a little bit more flat. So the color that I use, let me get that before I shift. So I base coat them with Vallejo Military Green, a nice blue-green military color, as opposed to Refractive Green, which is more of a yellow green than a blue-green. So our first bit here is literally just
blast it on. So this is what's nice about the Zenthial highlight. So long as you're able to control the amount of pigment that comes out of the airbrush, it's literally just coating it in the color. So just go in and just, as long as it's a thin watered down coat, you're literally just coating the thing with it. This is actually pretty thick. I think my mix is a little off right now. It does appear to be, you know, a little. There we go, much better. Tiniest amount. There we go, and just go around and hit it with the military green.
application, you can kind of see the gradients taking place. And so that looks pretty solid compared to it originally, because then I'll be able to wash it with brown, black, and green to bring that shade down. So it looks pretty solid. It looks like we got it. And so then the next part set up on it. Now this one is going to be lighter because
I'm going to want to stick out a little more on top of them. So we're going to go in with more air and less pigment, and really just lightly layer this green on to let more of that white show through. So there we go. So you can see the edges are still raised, a little bit lighter of a green. Our sides here. And the other side as well.
there we go. And so then that is our completed military green base coat for the BMP-3s. Okay, so for our last bit of airbrushing, we're going to be doing the tan lines on these guys. The way that I do the turrets is I make sure to put a little bit of sticky tack on the peg. Kind of see it like that. And so then when I push it down, it locks it into place so that I can continue the camouflage lines over the entirety of the vehicle. So I get my tan camo color, which is, I don't know where the bottle went because it ran out. And I have a premix in here, German Camo Beige. Just the color.
And just go in and making sure you're doing it lightly. Just little circular spinning motions. Just begin layering the color on. I'm trying to make it a little bit, I guess you could say, erratic. I'm trying to make no two vehicles, so juggle this kind of thing. I'm trying to make no two vehicles look alike. I'm going to carry in and give the tires somewhat of a touch of that as well, for the road wheels at least. The outside, and now we're going to turn. Try to airbrush one a little better. Yeah. Things are here, and just layer out that color. I'm going to do a little offshoot from here. Not going on too thick. Something down into the front here. Tell how to connect. And there we go. Tan camouflage. I want to hit the back actually. So yeah. Lining. This brush is hit or miss at times. Fortunately, it's easy enough to clean up and get in there. But there we go. So there's a hedged piece. And then what we're going to do here as well is rotate our turret over, because you see the nice gun line right there from where the gun was, and then just go right where we're going in. And try and hit the sides of these a little. Like so. getting away from the body.
And there we go. A fully camouflaged BMP-3. Or not fully. All the airbrushing is done on these guys now. So we're now shifting into the brush painting stages of the Marine. We're going to be starting with hitting all of the lenses. We're going to be using Luftwafe Uniform World War II. So we grab one of our smaller brushes as well, which will be because if it's one thing, these modern vehicles have a lot of its lenses, which I mean makes sense. You want improved, you want good good visibility on these armored fighting vehicles. So, I'm trying to identify all the lens locations, and I'll actually be able to use this. This one here is a comparison. So we got a little range finding, all of our ones up top, and all of our ones on the sides. Alright. So we got our little fella right here. We got our fella right here. Our other fella right up here. So what's this one? We got right here. And another one right here. Then all of our little side angle viewers. That aren't so much for aiming as they are just for general awareness. There we go, and that is our last one on our turret. So we're going to shift onto the hull. A pretty fair amount of them up front in these portions here. There one there, and then we got 5 in the driver's slot. Right, and then we got all of our little passenger ones as well. So 2 right there, and then 1 right here. And there we go. Lenses are all base coated. next bit is going to be our black-gray lining. So we'll be done with black-gray. So we're going to be using similar to prior, a smaller brush. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be edging some of our tans with a line of solid black gray. Like so, to give that little secondary or tertiary color a pop. Go. We'll do one more. Well, no, because he's got one there. We'll do one right on this edge. Remembering to keep it kind of squiggly and erratic. And there we go. Some black lining to make our camo pop a little. And then we'll do the same with bits on the turret. So. Right through the center. And then we'll have this one off on the side doing its thing. And there we go. Tertiary camouflage color on the BMP-3 added. So our next portion is going to be taking flat earth and hitting up the tracks and interior bits like so. For this, you're probably going to want to make sure that you're using a larger, more, I guess you could say, disposable brush, one that you don't necessarily care all that much about, or I shouldn't say care that all much about. I'm using a cheaper brush because I have some pretty expensive Kolinsky brushes for detail work and such. But I do have some nice, they're still good, still come to a decent enough point. They're nice enough. I'm okay wetting these guys up and just filling them with pigment so that then I can take our color here and then come in. That's actually just a little bit too thin, so I'm going to add more of the pigment to the brush. There we go. Come right in here. Did have a little bit of a line going, so we're going to basically stipple and dab ourselves onto this portion here for a little tiny touch of weathering. And now we're going to hit our sides and rear. Really just almost stippling. Then we're gonna come on in. You can see how there's a little bit of that tread that's sticking out. Paint that flat earth as well. back portion. Always use your finger to kind of remove to give it a little bit more of a scraggly look. And we're going to hit this one. And then doing the same thing on the other side, hitting the interior portion of the tracks. And there we go. So, starting the first of our washes is this brown wash that I have made. I've made a couple of videos on how I make these dip washes. They're nice and easy. You just dunk them in, and then I have a little box down here that's off camera that I stick it into and spin around. And then I take a Q-tip and run it over the top to get those areas that it pooled. And it also kind of speckles it a little to give it a little bit of texture to it. And then I can have that guy standing to dry, and then same thing with the chassis. Do a mild readjust of the clamp. Give him a good shake drip, and then into the spinny box you go. And then we're back up here for the Q-tip. But so there's actually technically 3 washes that I do for my 3-tone Soviet camo. I wash the entire vehicle in brown and then in black. And then my final layer that I go over and do is I take a green wash and run it along the camouflage portions, the tan, the secondary color, and that darkens it up nicely. So you can kind of see how it's already kind of moving towards that color. And to see the black, in the off chance that I do not get a video of it, there's the color and hue with the black wash. So there's the finish. So it's just one more touch of green onto the tan. It's a very light touch, but usually ends up working pretty well. So our next step is going to be the black wash to darken the overall vehicle. So same as the brown, this time just black though. So we do our little dip, shake ourselves off, reposition our alligator clip, do our little spin bits, and then take our Q-tip to remove all of this extra. So our next bit is just our little turret here. There we go. So dip, shake, spin. And then same thing with the Q-tip. Get all of that extra off. And then let it all dry. So our next portion is going to be the green wash, which is going to be a targeted wash, so I'm not going to be fully dunking the model in it this time. I'm going to be taking one of my brushes that I use for texture paints, things of the sort, not one of my nice brushes, obviously. And I'm going to make sure that I apply this green only to the tan striping on the camouflage pattern on the model. It's okay to have a little bit of color bleed because once you've finished a little portion of the model, I went in with the Q-tip and took off all the extra excess. So if a little bit bleeds over into the green, that actually ends up working out for the better because you have a little bit more of a gradient to mess with then, a little bit more modeling. And so then you can see there the bottom portion of the tank that the wash has been applied to. The tan takes more of a green hue. It is still definitely tan, but it gives that worn and almost wet kind of appearance that I'm going for with these vehicles. And there we go. Pretty simple little greening of the camo. So our next portion that we are doing is the little detail bits. So we're going to be hitting some of the wood handles on our various equipment, doing some further detailing on the lenses, and then the metal, any of the bits of metal. So doing our wood bits first, I use Vallejo's Mahogany Brown. So I come in here, I believe that the only ones right in here. There we go, got some of the wood. I tend to undercoat my metals with black gray. So unfortunately, as my roommates at the time were being a little bit loud, we've now shifted into voiceover mode. So I undercoat my metals, like I said, with black gray. Then I'll wash them, or contrast, depending on what you're wanting to use word-wise there, with a black ink or a contrast paint. Usually contrast black Templar, I believe, is the exact paint that I use to darken them. And then if I'm wanting to add a silver shine to it with a metallic paint, I take a very light dry brush with, if memory serves, is Gunmetal Grey by Vallejo. And then that light dry brush catching the edges of the gray washed black color makes a very nice dark metal color. Our next bit here is going to be detailing up our lenses, where I'm going to take the same Luftwaffe uniform here and start layering it up. The base color was darkened when it was washed over with the brown and the black, so this reapplication will brighten it up a little bit. Our next stage is going to be adding sky blue so that we're able to start mixing our Luftwaffe blue and sky blue together to start getting slightly lighter shades of blue to begin building an upward gradient to mimic a light reflection. So I just kind of mix those up. I really play this by ear. I don't have an exact mix that I'll use. Or if it looks a little bit too light, I add more of the Luftwafe blue. If it looks a little bit too dark, I add a touch of the sky blue. And you just go in and hit a top corner. Then I just repeat the process for the turret. Our final stage with the BMP-3s is our dry brush. I use Iraqi Sand. It's a nice, bright yellow tan that when used sparingly in a dry brush really accents the model very nicely. So you load up your dry brush. And then you take your model and just go to town. Relatively quick process overall that leaves a very nice highlight catching the edges. And almost weathers it to a point as well. So there we go. Very light touch. You can kind of see the difference. And then we do the same with the turret. Making sure to catch all of our edges. And there we go. Start to finish, the completed BMP-3 in shock camo. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of my amazing patrons. Your support is greatly appreciated and you help me do what it is that I do for you. General Tier Paxton, Paulie One Walnuts, Colonel, Carter was here, Tall Step YT, Ripley, Otto Von Beatus, Lieutenant Tier, Thailand, and Triple X 22097. Thank you all of you for your support. I couldn't be doing this without you. You're amazing.